Pawn shop employees of Reddit. What is something people think is collectible or worth a lot of money, but is actually relatively worthless? Swarovski crystal ain't worth garbage. I used to flip computers and people could not understand that their used, broken computer is not worth the $500 they originally paid for it. I work at a hobby shop, not a pawn shop, but we buy and sell collectibles. Top vote goes to comic books and Pokémon cards. I've literally had people come in with garbage bags full of crumpled comic books from 20 years ago that look like they were buried in a swamp, expecting thousands of dollars for them. Likewise, Pokémon was the hottest media franchise in the world when it came out. Everyone had them, many still do. Lots of new cards are actually worth more than the old base set rares. If you're going to sell anything, do your research, for your sake and the vendors. I don't understand how someone can try to sell something and have no idea what it's worth. If you don't even have a frame of reference for what a fair price is, what do you hope to accomplish? At that point you're just using your willful ignorance as an excuse to assume you're getting ripped off just because you, like 99% of people, don't have a treasure trove of collectibles. Pawn shop employee here. Get a ton of people bringing TVs in thinking they're going to get $100+, but the market is so oversaturated, you're most likely gonna get less than 50 even for your 60 inches TV. State quarters full set. So many grandmas think a full book with all the state quarters there are priceless. Worth exactly as much as 50 by 0.25. Fine art. Every once in a while, someone finds an old master drawing, etc. in their attic, but for the most part it's mostly junk by amateurs. Also, just because family lore claims a painting is by such and such a person, without concrete documentation that claim is worthless. Edit. As a PSA, don't take fine art to a pawn shop. If you have any inkling that a work of art is worth something, go to an auction house or professional appraiser. Jewelry. Especially diamond rings. Yeah, you paid thousands, it's worth considerably less. Longaberger baskets. The next state over there is a now defunct basket making company whose HQ is a giant basket. They were a thing for a while, similar to Beanie Babies, until the bottom fell out of the market. People were buying these things as a long-term investment, but they are practically worthless now. People think they still have value. Baseball autographs after like 1935, Willie Mays, Ted Williams, Mickey Mantle, yeah, they sign thousands of things, often lowers values of their cards. IIRC. Most second-hand electric guitars are significantly less expensive than they are when brand new, even if it is a major brand like Gibson or Fender. People would get offended at the offers we would make them because they didn't understand what a retail markup is and they didn't realize that most guitars lose 50% of their value the moment you purchase them. Pawn shop employee here. Just a friendly reminder that no one wants to buy your great-grandmother's china set. Not exactly this but similar. I worked in a used book store for years. We offered cash and store credit for trade-ins. So many people couldn't grasp that if we are selling a book for $3, it meant we would buy it for way less than that. They'd haul in a box of trash expecting a grand payday. They also didn't understand that a book being a mega bestseller or on an Oprah list or made into a movie years ago made it less valuable for us. If 10 mil people bought the book in 2012, then 2 mil have probably already traded theirs in and the other 8 mil still have it and aren't likely to buy more copies. No, you aren't getting $10 for the Da Vinci Code because we have 2 shelves full of copies selling for $6 each right over there. Not a pawn shop employee, but I'll share what the guy I went to told me. I priced out some coins and a watch for my dad's estate, and the watch, even though it was in excellent condition and from 1905, was worth like $125. The coins were basically worthless. He told me, go skip these across a pond if you want to get any enjoyment out of them. Auctioneer here. The Longaberger baskets and china, both had their time in the spotlight, now they need their time in the trash. Very few dishes are worth any money anymore. Furniture at auction, resale is a must. High quality furniture for low prices. Pawn shop employee here. There's a lot, but one that stands out to me right now are watches. Brands like Fossil, Michael Kors, Citizen, etc. cost you over $100 at stores like Macy's, but we typically sell them for about $40, even in like new condition. When something goes from new to used, the value of said item goes down a lot. I sell things online, and one thing people never seem to understand is that just because you paid a certain amount for something doesn't mean it's actually worth anywhere near that. Anything from the Franklin Mint, or similar companies. We would get so many porcelain dolls, and collectible plates. Fad toys like Beanie Babies that everyone thought would be worth a ton of money. If the thrift stores are full of piles of it, it is worthless. If the pawn shops are full of it, it's also worthless. If everyone thought it was going to pay their retirement, it's worthless. Clothing. I know most pawn shops don't sell clothing, but clothing is not worth what you pay for it once you remove the tags. Also, most clothing that you think is worth money is not. Most mall brand clothing that you pay $50 for will sell for about $5 per item on eBay if it even sells at all. Don't even get me started on what those items are originally tagged. If you wear it once, the depreciation is probably 80% of what you paid for it or even more, and that would be for the higher end brands. Not a pawn shop employee, but I flip things, and one thing that a lot of people misunderstand is comic books. They're usually not worth more than a couple bucks unless you go really far back, like 50s, early 60s, even then they need to be in excellent condition. A few scuffs around the edges and a bit of fading can easily make a $1,000 book worth $50. Until very recently, I worked in a thrift store, which I'd argue is close enough that I feel qualified to weigh in here. Old newspapers and magazines, even a very historically significant events, are generally worthless. I threw out several newspapers about the moon landing and Jake's assassination throughout my year and a half at that job. People tend to think those were two of the biggest news headlines of that generation. The original papers must be worth a lot 50 years later. Well, they aren't, because when JFK died, and when Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon, everyone in the world knew those moments were going in the history books, so everyone held onto those newspapers. Even today, there are still a ton of them out there, in very good condition, so they aren't worth much. All that to say, there definitely are some old newspapers that are worth a lot of money, but they're going to be the moments that we look back on as defining moments in history, but weren't fully appreciated in the moment. For example, a newspaper about Coca-Cola being sold by its founder to a group of investors in 1919 recently sold for almost $7,000. That might not be considered a defining moment in history even today, but it's still worth more than any moon landing newspapers, because why the hell would somebody save that Coke newspaper for a century? Collectible items. Just because you Dale Earnhardt 2-in-1 bidet and water bottle says it's collectible doesn't mean that anyone wants it. Old TVs. A guy I knew would advertise that he bought old TVs. Old people would call him and let him into their houses to get the TV. It was just a ploy to get into their house. He would then look around and offer them lowball prices for any antique bric-a-brac that he spotted, like 50 for Hummel statues. He'd buy their TV and dump it somewhere, and make a mint selling their actually valuable things. My cousin worked at this pawn thrift store in our hometown that was in the middle of nowhere. One thing that was always common were those old creepy dolls made with glass faces, real hair, etc. He's told me stories of people fighting over these dolls, but in the end they couldn't use them for anything. The dolls would be so old and fragile that even touching them was a risk of the whole thing breaking apart. Sure, you could collect them, but there were a lot of problems that got in the way of them being worth anything. Edit. I talked to him last night about this. He told me this story of how he was asked to put one on a shelf one time, and just a few seconds after he had carefully placed it on the shelf, the head tilted and rolled off. Never before had he screamed so loudly. To his confusion, someone still wanted to buy it. There was also this investigation that happened, because of a suspicion that a doll in the store was grave robbed along with a few other things, yet this old woman still wanted to purchase the doll. When she heard that the doll had been taken into investigation by police after, she threw a fit, swearing more than my cousin had ever heard in his life. In the end, the doll was confirmed to have been grave robbed, to my cousin's trauma of just making it more creepy. I've got an attic full of old Star Wars toys that I played with when I was a kid. Every time a new movie came out before Disney bought the rights, there would always be a huge uptick in toy sales. Some of the stuff I have from the late 70s and early 80s is worth a little, but I've heard all the later released toys are practically worthless barring a few rare exceptions. The stuff I have might net a couple grand at best. Not the investment I thought it would be when I was younger. Not a pawn store employee, but I flip things. Fish tanks are worthless. A $1,000 brand new fish tank is worth fluff all. Large tanks explode when they get old. Garbage, even small ones explode. Close. Prono shop owner. Amazing people think their run-of-the-mill VHS Pronos are worth anything, and #X200B. I just calmly look at the guy and go, I have a warehouse with over 80,000 VHS tapes. You want 500 of them? You can have them for nothing, just take as many as you can fit in your car. Smiley face. Baseball cards, sure, I have heard of that person, but it is the wrong year, the wrong brand, and it looks like it rode around in the spokes of a bicycle. Not a pawn shop employee though. Worked in an antique shop for a while. It was always heartbreaking bringing the news that people's Art Deco furniture brings less than a new one from IKEA, or that their family heirloom is just trash their great-grandparents naively bought thinking it's of high value. Most people underestimate how much it costs to bring even slightly damaged items to resellable condition. And people also highly underestimate how many crooks were around the time where now antique items were produced. Think you got a bronze statue there? Nope, just tin with bronze paint. Genuine sterling silver spoons? Nope, barely even a low-quality silver coat.